Hello, my name is Eric Launer. I'm an FMLS trainer, and this is the recording of the Matrix Adding and Editing Listings webinar. In this webinar, you'll learn how to access and navigate through the Matrix system specific to adding a new listing, editing an existing listing, changing a listing status, as well as adding and modifying open houses, caravans, and photos. Let me switch over to my live login here. In the Matrix system, you might notice that on the Home tab here, I've basically closed out of all of my widgets, save for the My Listings widget. We might use this at a certain point. You have the option. It's not necessarily necessary to have this on your desktop, but we'll take a look more at that later. Our first bullet point under accessing and navigating through the system, of course, was to add a new listing. So let's just jump right into that topic. What you're going to do is to add a new listing, you're going to click on the Add Edit tab toward the top of Matrix. And on the screen that appears under the heading of Input is the Listings area. In that Listings area, we have two links, Add New, Edit Existing, as well as a drop down under the heading of Quick Modify. And just to the right of that is a box to type in an FMLS number. The only one that we're really concerned with right now is the only one we're going to use to add a new listing, and that is the Add New link. So after you click Add New, your first choice at that point is what property category should this listing be in? We have several options here. Residential input is going to be for single-family homes, condos, townhomes, basically residential properties for sale. Residential lease input, the second one down, is for your rentals, so condos for rent, homes for rent, etc. Residential income input focuses on what we used to call, for instance, multifamily dwellings. So basically think of it like you bought the entire duplex and you're wanting to maybe rent the other side or sell the other side as an income property. So again, really residential income input is for multi-unit properties that you own all of them and you're going to then sell off some of those or something like that. Land input is your input screens for just a blank land. That also deals with lots as well. So it's either just literally a plot of land, or maybe it's a lot that has a sewer hookup, electric, it has the utilities perhaps. There's just not necessarily a structure on that lot quite yet. That also falls under the heading of land. And then the last one is your commercial sale listings, So if it's a commercial or industrial property, you're going to put that under commercial sales. So at FMLS, we tend to focus on residential properties. So I'm going to use that as my example. So I'm going to go ahead and click residential input. The next screen that comes up actually begins my data input of this particular listing. The first choice that I have to make here is how to start this listing. I have three choices as shown in the green bar along the top. Three of them here. Fill from realist tax we see is the default, and it's the default because it's the first selected. This is not a link that I can click on. It's kind of in bold. All right, so the other choices are fill from cross property and start with a blank property. I'm going to go ahead and describe these three choices and give you examples as to when you might use them. So I'm going to start in the center here with the start with a blank property. Generally speaking, I would not recommend that you start with this for two reasons. The first reason is that you get no shortcuts whatsoever. Using the other two choices, you'll get shortcuts into entering your property information. So that's always nice. And the other reason, kind of tied in with that, it's a shortcut, but it's a very specific shortcut. Think about for a moment square footage. Even if it's not explicit in your client, if you're working with a buyer for perhaps, even if it's not explicitly stated as a preference or an important criteria for your client, it typically is, right? People want to always consider the size of the home or the property that they're interested in. So almost equally as important as the sheer number of square feet in a particular property is the source of that number. Where did you come up with the fact that this house has 3,000 square feet, for instance? So the reason I mention this is the gold standard, if you will, of that source of information is from the public records, from the tax records. The reason it's the gold standard is because when the system is able to tell an agent who's interested in your property that the source of the square footage is from the tax records, they also know then that the amount of taxes paid, the assessed value, all of that type of information that pulls in from a tax record was done automatically. There was no real room for error, at least on the part of the person entering the listing, because that information pulls automatically from the tax record when you select that first option, fill from realist tax. Okay, which I'm going to recommend at the end. So again, still free from here on the start with the blank property. 1, you get no shortcut. And 2, to wrap this little part of the speech up, if we know that the property records are the gold standard and why that's the gold standard, it's going to give them not only the square footage and the tax record so that they're not going to buy something today and get surprised with a huge tax bill later the second they send somebody out and say, wait, the old owner did 900 square feet of improvement on it. The reason here is that you are unable to say, oh, this is 3,000 square feet. And yeah, that's from the tax record. As I mentioned it quickly in passing a few moments ago, it's done automatically on the computer. So you're not able to select for yourself that the number that you're typing in is from the tax record. The computer has to do it automatically. And the way it does that is in that first option. Okay, over there, fill from realist tax. The one in the middle there, fill from cross property, that's kind of a bit of a wordy way of saying copy a listing. All right, so here's just some quick thoughts on copying a listing. First of all, know that the only listings that you can copy are the ones that are yours. So you are the listing agent of that previous listing. And don't forget that listings are actually owned by the brokerage. Even though you're the one doing maybe all the legwork, that listing is owned by the brokerage. So even though you are the listing agent from the original listing that you want to copy, if you've since moved offices or brokerages, you're not going to be able to copy that, because even though you were the one that did the work last year, if you've moved offices, that still doesn't count. All right. So you're not able to copy anybody else's listings. You're not able to copy your own if you've moved. Okay. But here are some options as to why you might do that. Of course, maybe you had a listing last year that just didn't sell. And in the meantime, the homeowners have done some improvements. They've paid down some of the mortgage, right? They're wanting to go another time, trying their hand at selling the listing. Obviously, that would be something you could do. You could copy that old listing. It would bring over almost all of it and just kind of fill in what you need to, and off you go. Some other thoughts, though. Let's just say, for example's sake, you've got a seller who needs to be in Seattle, Washington 2 weeks from now. They don't have a lot of time. They really just need to kind of get out from under this mortgage, whether you sell it or you find a renter for them who takes care of the mortgage. That's fine either way. You could maybe put it in for sale and then copy that over to the rental category. So you can copy across categories. That's an available option. And then the last kind of food for thought I'm going to give you on copying a listing, which is that, again, middle option here, fill from cross property. Let's say you're lucky enough to maybe land a job listing for a big subdivision or a new condo building that's going up. That new subdivision, that new condo building, most of those new properties are going to all look similar. So maybe there's just little bits of details here and there that you want to change. Use it kind of like a cookie cutter, like a template. Enter the first one and then copy it and make the necessary changes along the way as you publish each subsequent listing. So there's just some thoughts on copying a listing. So the last one that I'm going to end with here is the fill from realist tax. So not only is it on the opposite side of start with a blank property that I've went into detail already on in the bar, but it's also, of course, the opposite philosophically. So why I recommend fill from realist tax is you're going to get some of the shortcuts when it's going to pull in pertinent information from the property record. And also you're going to get that tax record as the source of the square footage, which is, again, the gold standard for your square footage source. So how we're going to do this is on the left, you'll notice the counties that Realist has data for. Certainly all of the metro Atlanta counties are represented. I'm going to pull one of the properties that I'm familiar with over in Gwinnett County. So I'll choose Gwinnett from the list of counties. And then over to the right of that, I have 3 ways that I can pull in data about this property. I've got street number, street name, unit number. I've got owner name, and I've got tax ID. I would recommend street number, street name, unit number over owner name and tax ID, just because owner names can be spelled incorrectly or just historically inaccurate on the tax assessor's database. The tax ID might have a dash or a leading 0 or a trailing 0 stripped out or replaced in some fashion. So consistently, the street number and street address are a better option. So this one is 107 in my street number. Street name is Jennifer in my example. Notice in the street name, I'm not typing in drive, avenue, trace. Those are separate. That's a separate field called street type. So don't worry about putting in exactly what kind of lane, avenue, street, drive this is, just the name. Notice that I've got a unit number field. I mentioned it earlier, but I'm now flashing there. So I'm going to come back to this in just a second. Notice that there's a unit number. When you have your address entered and your county selected, go ahead and click search. It will search that county's record for the appropriate address. We have now found it. Notice that it put lane in there for me when it found it. Okay. So as I said just a moment ago, there's a unit number field. So I want to point out an example here. Just use your imagination for a second. Let's pretend that what I was listing was a condo building. If it was a condo building and I had forgotten to put the unit number field in, what I would be presented with here is a big long list of all of the potential units at that property. Or if, for instance, there was a Jennifer Lane, a Jennifer Avenue, a Jennifer Trace, and there was a 107 address at all of those different Jennifers, I would find multiple records. Okay, because at the bottom in this bar are cancel and revise search. All right, there's not necessarily a continue button. So it might be a little odd here, especially when we have just the one record that I did intend, but how I'm going to continue. If you notice over here to the left of my result, I have the link that says fill, and that's exactly what I want to do. I want to fill from the property records, from the tax records, the data that will get me further. So the fill link is what I'm going to look for. And again, if I had multiples, I would just choose the one that said fill to the left of the result that I intended. So I'm going to go ahead and click fill here. And this is where I like to tell people, get your refill of whatever maybe it is you're drinking at your computer, get comfortable, maybe go to the bathroom, whatever you want to do, because you're going to be settling in basically, as this is where all of your time is going to be spent entering the listing. You'll notice we have many tabs along the top here: location, listing, agent office, legal, financial, etc., etc. I, as an FMLS staff person, have a tab at the end here called matrix testing. You're not going to have that one. Don't worry. If your screen doesn't match mine, that's fine. It's just more important to me as an instructor that I show you exactly what the system looks like and how it's going to behave and respond, rather than just teach you from screenshots. So forgive me if I have some extra links and tabs along the way. I'll try to point those out. So anyway, after you put your choice there of how you want to start the listing, this is where you come across these tabs. Notice that they're not numbered, so I can bounce across any of these tabs in any order that I would like. It's not important what order I do them. Also, in case you're like, oh my goodness, there's a lot of tabs there, this is going to take me forever. Realize that on most of these tabs, as we look through them, they're very short. Notice that there's not necessarily a scroll bar over here on the right side of the screen. So they are segmented just so that common fields are in the same tab. For instance, all of the interior selections are on the interior tab, exterior selections. So it's just done to make the most logical sense. All right, there's not really an inordinate amount of information you're going to need to do. But let's go ahead and start at the beginning. So on the location tab, notice over here on the left, it says map not found. Well, that's not good, because when the map not found selection is up, what that tells me is if somebody's trying to get driving directions in my listing, they're not going to be able to get them because the system doesn't know exactly where the property is. And the reason for that is it pulled in all of this city, state, zip, and all that kind of stuff after it tried to do the map. So all I've got to do, it's very, very quick and easy. Right below the map, the first link is update map. That's all I need to do. I'm just going to click update map. There we go. Now it finds the property. It puts a little blue pin there, and I'm good to go. While we're still kind of on this topic, I have get latitude, longitude from address in case I want to know what that latitude, longitude is for that tab. Maybe I'm doing something in some other system like Zillow or Trulia or something that wants me to put some kind of pin down. I have that choice. Set latitude, longitude manually. That would be good for in case, let's just say your subject property is facing one street, but the driveway is actually around back. Maybe it's on a side street, or maybe you're out towards the country and you have a really long driveway and you'd rather the pin go to the end of the driveway because you can't maybe see the house from the end of the driveway. So you'd like the pin rather to be where the property is or where the structure is. You want it to be where the driveway is. You can click set latitude, longitude manually and select where that pin goes. Also, very important to me, I like the choose Google Street View link. So the purpose here is on most listings. So for instance, if your property is behind some kind of gate that a client or that the Google Street car wouldn't necessarily have access to, you're probably not going to have Google Street View on that kind of listing. But in most cases, Google Street View is kind of ubiquitous now. It's all over the place. So the purpose here is if you click Google Street View, what comes up is going to be where the view is when somebody goes to that View Google Street View tab. Now you might notice just a moment ago I zoomed it kind of to the street. Why in the world would I do that? The reason I do that is a lot of times if you've ever used Google Street View, normally it comes up to the street. Or for instance, you might have something like this where you're seeing multiple homes and you're like, well, which home is it? I don't know. So that's the entire purpose of selecting this view. So the first question that I frequently get asked on this particular topic is, can I update the photo? And I'm sorry, but no, we don't have that kind of power over Google. So I have to use the best ability here that I have with what I've been given. So for instance, I don't like these trash cans here. I don't like the fact that I'm seeing two houses in the view. It's this one that I've got, for instance, listed perhaps. So what I want to do is I want to kind of just drag and around, get that kind of centered. In the lower right corner, I have a zoom in and zoom out button. So I want to kind of zoom in past the trash cans a little bit, right? So maybe I'm going to do this because if I zoom in any further, I don't really enjoy the picture too much. I want to get kind of a little far out as possible as I can. So in any event, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click OK. And now that has been set for my Google Street View when somebody clicks on that, if they do that in my listing. Okay. So that's all about the map there on the left side of the screen. Let's leave that for now. The next thing that you might notice, if you haven't already, is that a lot of these fields are gold. All right, they've got this kind of golden background. And the fields that have a golden background also will have a little red asterisk after the title. So for instance, we've got subdivision/complex. It's got a little red asterisk after the word complex. The field is gold. That red asterisk and gold background to the field indicate that that is a required field. When I say required fields, it means I cannot leave it blank. I've got to type something in there. Now, this particular home is in a subdivision, but just for example's sake, to have this point to talk about, let's just say that this house was on the side of I-85 or something. Okay, it wasn't in a subdivision. It was just on the side of the road somewhere. I can't leave subdivision complex blank. What I would want to do, what we would prefer that you put in there is the word none. If your listing is not in a subdivision, not in a complex, type in the word none. Okay, we cannot leave that field blank. The system will not allow you to publish a listing as active. It will not allow the listing to go live if you have a required field that's blank. All right. If we keep going on the listing screen, this is where we're going to kind of choose what type of property it is. Remember, we just said residential sale. So now we're deciding, is this a single family home? Is it detached, or is it a condo? Is it a townhouse or otherwise attached? Okay. So just make your selections along the list here. This is also where you're going to be putting in your list price, your list date, expiration date, commission. Owner name will pull in from the tax record. So what most agents will do is they'll take that out and they'll type in call owner, or call agent, I should say, pardon me. Okay. So you want to kind of make sure you're doing that. It's fairly standard practice now. Okay. Two other fields that I like to point out on this screen: include InstaView Tour and allow internet display. So include InstaView Tour. Notice that it defaults to yes. What this talks about, on every listing entered into the system, you can have up to 2 virtual tours on the listing. You can have a free virtual tour, which is this one, the InstaView Tour. This will happen if this says yes and you have 3 or more photos on the listing. If this says yes and you have 3 or more photos, bingo, you've got an InstaView Tour on your listing. The InstaView Tour is free. I think it's a fairly fantastic product for being free, because you can go in and you can reorder the photos. You can add more than 40 photos. We're going to talk about photos in just a little bit. Okay. But you can add a lot of photos there. You can change the color. You can change the music. It's very customizable for being a free product. So I encourage you to take a look at it. However, your other choice for a virtual tour is to have one that you've paid for. Maybe there's some fancy schmancy company around here that's going to do a drone fly through of the house. It's going to play Handel's water music. It's going to be all lifestyles of the rich and famous. And so you're spending good money on that virtual tour, and you want to make darn sure that that fancy virtual tour is the one that's being featured on your listing. Absolutely fair. Totally understand. All you got to do is come in and say include InstaView Tour no. And on a subsequent tab up here, we're going to see in just a minute or two, there will be a place to paste the URL that tour company gave you once they upload your tour to the web somewhere. So all you got to do is come in and make that choice. So let's just say, for example's sake, a few weeks go by, a few days, maybe a few hours, depends on how diligent your seller is. And the seller says to you, hey, my neighbor's property is up for sale and I'm not going to be outdone by my neighbor. They've got 2 virtual tours on their property. Why don't I have 2? And you're going to say, well, I want to feature this one. It's really a lot nicer, in my opinion. We're going to go with this. And still they tell you, nope, I'm the boss. It's my property. They got 2 virtual tours. I want 2 virtual tours. Again, all you got to do to change your mind is come right back in here, flip no back to yes. Boom, off you go, no problem. Okay, so you can always choose yes or no there. The other one that I mentioned, allow internet display. This is an important one to me because unfortunately out in the world, there are people who are survivors of domestic abuse. There are people who, for whatever reason, it doesn't matter who they are, they just don't necessarily want everyone in the world to know that their property's up for sale. They don't want photos of the interior of their home viewable to anybody who's just kind of flipping through idly on Zillow or Front Door or Redfin or something like that. So if you've got a situation where somebody does not want their listing announced to the public, but it's still obviously important to get that listing in the system so that other local agents can find it when they have matches to properties like yours, you would just want this to say no. Okay, so allow internet display just prevents this particular individual listing from going out, as I said, to places like Trulia, Redfin, Zillow, things like that. Okay, just some ones that I want to point out there. Agent/office. This is just your listing agent. So more than likely, this is your own listing, so you don't have to worry about this. But if in case you're an office manager, a listing coordinator, an assistant who's maybe doing this for someone else on someone else's behalf, you might need to actually search for and enter who it's for. The legal tab, notice that, for instance, the tax ID came in, the square footage, as I mentioned before, square footage source says public records. Okay, so this is the type of data. This is the kind of shortcut data that's pulled in. Also, of course, you might have noticed or remembered back on that first tab, it had filled in Lane and the fact that this was over in Lilburn with the zip code. That data is what came in from the tax record. Okay, so again, you just want to make sure that you're filling in all of the gold fields. And if something is not clear to you, if you're not exactly sure what, for instance, section/GMD means, notice there's these little gray circles with the question marks to the left that you can click on to get more information about what is that, and kind of make your best selection based on what you might find out there. All right, so I'm just going to kind of keep going across the top. Financial. This is where taxes, again, are pulled in here. So this particular property paid almost $2,700 in taxes in the year 2017, for instance. So again, just keep filling in your required fields, right? So the ones that have no color to them, they're kind of clear or white, whatever you kind of want to think these as being. These are not required. Also, by the way, you might notice, especially on this tab, Master Association Fee Frequency. This one has 2 asterisks after it. When you see a double asterisk, that means that this particular field may be required depending on a previous selection. So in this case, it's very easy to kind of understand that if I were to put in here that the Master Association fee was $200, for example, this field would then become required and say, well, is that $200 annually or monthly or quarterly? How often do I have to pay $200? So clearly, if Master Association fee was 0, I wouldn't necessarily have to add the frequency per se, right? Makes sense? So just know that a double asterisk means it could potentially be required based on a related field. And if you're still not sure, again, don't forget you have the little circle with the gray fill-in with the question mark that can give you some clues as to what field it is in case you're not sure that was made this one required. Okay, so that's the financial tab. Rooms. Again, notice, by the way, in case some of you are feeling like, oh my gosh, these are a lot of tabs. There are a lot of tabs, I'll grant you. However, hopefully, again, you're seeing the logic. You're seeing why these are kind of grouped together. So rooms, we have bedrooms, laundry, master bathroom, features. These all kind of logically flow together. And also, there's not a scroll bar. So again, don't feel like even though there's a number of tabs along the top, that doesn't necessarily imply that there's going to be a ton of data on each particular tab. They're just done to kind of group them in that logical order. Okay, so one last time, I'm going to kind of point this out. Remember that gold fields are required. So you may recall from when I was setting that Google Street View that this home is a ranch. There's not necessarily an upper floor in that ranch. So if there's not an upper floor, then how am I going to put number of bedrooms, bathrooms, half baths? Well, that's where 0 comes into play, right? So I would just fill those with 0 because remember, a gold field has to have something in there. So it could be the word none, it could be a 0, okay? That's fine, it just needs a touch, okay? Otherwise, keep going. Interior, here are other bits of information about the home: utilities, the type of electric, number of fireplaces, window features. Exterior will have fencing. For instance, I have dogs, so when I look for a next home, I want a fenced yard, that kind of thing. How many spaces in the carport or garage, right? All in the exterior type of setting. As a matter of fact, we have a tab for setting, including waterfront footage if you're on a lake. Do you have a dock, right? That kind of stuff. There's a green tab, so as we move further into the future, I would love to live in a house that had some solar panels on it personally. Obviously, of course, everybody has opinions on just about anything in the real estate business. So in any event, there is a green tab where you can look specifically for green features. So I would expect this to build over the years. All right. We have our remarks tab. So there's public, private, including directions. Notice that you do have a countdown on your character count. So if you start getting too wordy, it's going to let you know that you need to wrap it up. Okay. Also, if I could give you just a bit of friendly advice, in the directions field, even though it's, well, at the time of this recording, it's 2019. So we pretty much all use GPSs. If you maybe you're old enough to recall a particular book in the 70s called How to Win Friends and Influence People, it actually might predate that, I don't know. But in any event, you're not going to win friends or influence people by typing in the directions field, use GPS. There's no rules against it. So if you want to type that in, by all means, you do you. That's fine. Go ahead. However, it's not the best idea because frankly, it takes only a minute to type in directions to your property. And I will frequently challenge people to sit in the passenger seat of a car, put the address in the onboard GPS of the car, and then also put the same address in your phone in like Waze or whatever maps program you use on your phone. And I would guarantee that you're going to get 2 different ways to get there. And probably one of them doesn't know that that bridge is out or there's construction or a lot of traffic or what have you. So you can potentially lose some showings of your property just by not putting directions in the listing. So, hey, it's 1 or 2 minutes that are going to serve you well. So in any event, that's just advice. So feel free to take it or not as you want to. The last one I want to mention on this tab, at the bottom, virtual tour link. So if you recall from that very first tab when I was telling you about the Allow InstaView tour, and that was the free one, and I told you that you might do your own paid virtual tour with some fancy company that's going to do that drone fly through. If that's the route that you're going to go, as I mentioned at that time, what they're going to do is they're going to go out and they're going to take their footage, take it back to the office, do that post editing, put the eagle noise and the lightning strikes and, all that cool After Effects stuff on your virtual tour. And then they're going to upload that somewhere on the web and send you the link to it. What you're going to do is you're going to take that link that they emailed you and you're going to paste that in here, okay, into the virtual tour link field. And that's what it's going to put on your listing. All right. So that's all of the tabs along the top there. Remember that matrix testing is one that I've got. You're not going to have that, so don't worry about that. So again, also remember that I can flip back and forth between these tabs any darn time I want to. So if I want to do this tab first and then go back to legal, that's fine. Otherwise, when I'm kind of ready to continue, I've got some choices down here along the bottom. Save is incomplete. Let's just say, for example's sake, let's say I'm doing this Monday morning. And the listing isn't going live until Friday. But Friday, I'm planning on driving out of town. It's just an inopportune time because I have had this Disney vacation planned for a year and a half, and I want to not lose this business, but I also don't want to skip out on Disney. I could enter this listing today as incomplete, save it, even if I'm not done. That's another reason I might save as incomplete, right? Maybe I don't know everything I need to know about the listing just yet. In any event, for whatever reason, I just want to kind of save it for now. I don't necessarily want it to go out to the public. I don't want it to go live, but I just want to save it as incomplete. There's my choice right there. Incomplete listings will last in the system 14 days. At the end of 14 days, if you have not published it, it will delete. So there is a bit of a time limit on it, but hopefully you agree that 2 weeks is plenty of time. I wouldn't recommend starting a listing more than 2 weeks out from the list date. Okay, but you have 2 weeks to kind of address an incomplete listing, and we'll take a look at that later because we are going to save this as an incomplete in just a moment. Otherwise, let's just say I'm ready to go. If I knew that I had everything ready and I was going to submit this listing, I could click Submit Property. But, obviously, I did not fill in every field. So I want you to notice what it's done. Notice that it's added these little red circles to the left of the fields and up here to the left of each tab, indicating what tabs, what fields I have errors in. It also put this red link down here that says there were errors on the input form. Click here to view them. So if I do that, here's a list of all of the fields that I have not addressed properly. Okay. By the way, I could do it that way. I could click submit and just kind of be surprised and see when I tried to submit this what I was missing. Or 2 hops to the left of that button back next to the save as incomplete over there, we have a validate button. The validate button will do exactly what just happened. So rather than trying to publish it, if I'm still only interested in saving this as incomplete, but I want to check and make sure of my progress, I can click validate anytime I want to without worrying about submitting it for active status, and just check and see, are these fields okay? Is that one filled in good? So that's what validate does. Otherwise, the only other one here is cancel input. As you can imagine, this is just one that I can back out and say, oh, wait, I was just kidding. I wasn't really wanting to do this listing right now. Right? So let's go ahead. Like I said, let's click Save as Incomplete because this is really the only one that's going to work right now because I clearly don't have all of my fields filled in that I need. So I'm going to click Save as Incomplete. Once I click that button, I get the following screen. Input succeeded. Your property has been successfully saved as incomplete. It gives me an FMLS number. Do not fear. That FMLS number is just kind of reserved at this point for this particular listing. With that number reserved, I can do a few things here. I can manage showing time. If you don't know what that is, showing time is a system where you can automate your showing schedule as well as your feedback forms. So for instance, if my seller worked third shift and the seller said to me, I'd really appreciate not having showings before 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I could set it up so that there are no showings before 1 during that work week of my sellers. And then also, as I said, manage my feedback. The feedback forms are completely customizable. I don't have to use some kind of generic questionnaire. So it's a very handy system. I can upload documents. We're not really going to talk about uploading documents today because the moment you click on that button, it's going to take me over into another system called RDocs. And this is a matrix training class, not an RDocs training class. So for instance, information on that topic, I would consult the knowledge base back on fmls.com, or you'll find other videos in the YouTube channel that will instruct you on how to upload a document. InstaView is the link that we see right here at this point. InstaView is that free virtual tour. The InstaView link will take you to where I was mentioning earlier. On that free virtual tour, you can change the color, the photos, add more photos, put them in a different order. You can change the music. That's the free virtual tour. If I wanted to go back to all the tabs that we just left, maybe I've now realized that I do have more information on the listing that I can start filling in. I could click continue editing down at the bottom there, or we can also add and edit photos. Let's take a look at adding and editing photos for right now. Let's talk about this. So when I click on that link, it takes me to this screen where I can select my photos, upload them, and work with them from here. So just real quickly, let me just upload some here. I'm going to click the browse button over to the right. This opens up my computer for browsing. So I've got a folder on my desktop that I put my pictures in here. So let's choose that one, this one, this one, this one, and that one. So what I'm doing is with my control key held down on my keyboard, I choose multiple photos. They don't necessarily have to be next to each other. If you're on a Mac, rather than a control key, you're going to do a command key. But for those of us on PCs, you have a control key. So you can select multiple photos by doing that. Click open in the lower right corner. It will upload those pictures. Okay, so what I want to next talk about with the photos is the order of the photos. FMLS does not mind that you have your photos in any order that you want. There's no business rule that says the first photo has to be an external front view. That's just the traditional kind of thought process, because if you don't have a sign in the yard of your listing, you can rely on that first photo that might be on the printout that they take with them to show them what the exterior is going to look like when they drive up. So that's kind of the standard, is exterior front being the first photo. But as long as there's at least one picture on your listing, that's what we care about, that you have at least one. You can have up to 40 here. But maybe I want to reorder these. So I do have kind of what I'm going to consider an exterior front of this home, but it's not exactly where I want it. It's very easy, drag and drop in the order that you want. If you notice along the very top of each of these pictures, it tells you what slot number the picture is in. So the first one just says primary slot, and then slot 2, 3, 4, etc. So if I want my picture in slot 5 to be my primary photo, all I have to do is take my mouse, and up where I see that slot 5, in that title bar is what that's called, if I click and hold down my mouse button, with my mouse button held down, I can now drag it, click and drag that to the order. So once I have it over to the left here, I let go of my mouse button, and now there's my primary photo. All right. The order, again, that you're in does not really matter to FMLS. A lot of people will do kind of like a walkthrough in the order of their photos. That's up to you. Some people will put all of the exterior photos together and then the interior photos. Honestly, what it boils down to is what you feel the strongest presentation style would be for your particular home. So I'm going to go ahead and just really quickly say that I'm going to do kind of as a walkthrough. So we're going to go from the front to the foyer to the living room to a bedroom, and then we'll kind of do backyard shots at the end. So again, it's up to you. So that's really quickly how you order them. Let's just say you don't like one of these pictures. Well, I don't like this bedroom photo that I've uploaded. All I'm going to do is put a check mark. Notice you have a little check box up in those title bars. Put a check mark next to the ones that you want to delete if you have multiples, and then just right down below, you've got cancel, delete, checked, or save. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that bedroom photo. It asks me, am I sure? I'm going to say yes, that's okay. So now the bedroom photo is gone, right? Pretty easy stuff. The only other thing really, there's two things actually to talk about with photos. The first one being each of the photos that you upload here, of the 40 that you have available, can have individual descriptions under them. So for instance, if I click on this particular picture, it opens up. And right below now, the full size, I have a link that says enter description. So if I want to just enter a description here, I can click that link, and it gives me a space to type something like, this house has great curb appeal, right? When I'm done putting in the comment for this particular photo, all I have to do is click done in the lower right corner. It lets me preview it to kind of proofread. And then when I'm happy with this particular picture, all I've got to do is click save at the bottom. Okay. If I ever want to come back to that and change it, maybe my client is a high school English teacher and I used horrible grammar and they want me to say something else. Notice that I have a link here to the right of what I typed in earlier to click edit. I could do that, make the corrections that the homeowner wants, or maybe I've come up with something better in the meantime. Do that, just click done once more, repeat the process, click done, click save when I wanted to. Another thing I want to notice, or I want to mention, I should say, is on the screen, notice in the upper right corner, I've got rotate arrows. For instance, this happens to me frequently. If I take pictures with my cell phone, sometimes they rotate when I upload them to my computer or Facebook or something, and it drives me nuts. So if, for instance, you're taking pictures with your cell phone and it does that to you, in the upper right corner, this screen also allows you to rotate the photo if that happens. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just click save. That's pretty standard stuff, or pretty easy, hopefully, to understand stuff. So let me give you one more bit of advice. I don't want to go on too many soapboxes here. That's not probably why you're here to listen to me today. But I want to give what I think is very good advice. You maybe, while I've been talking, have read up here in the typing what I've been showing you so far. But also up here it says, for maximum quality, upload photos at least 1024 by 768 pixels in size. Whether or not you know anything about pixels, essentially what this is saying is 1024 by 768 is the size of the photo. For instance, that right there is a 1024 by 768 file. All right, it says it's displayed at 640 by 480, so it's a little shorter actually. This would be bigger, okay? The point here is, and I don't know obviously what kind of device you're looking at this presentation on, but on my screen right here, I've got about I want to say this probably looks like a 22, 24-inch monitor, and this photo is taking up roughly a fifth of the screen, I would say, if I were to take a guess. That's a great size, honestly, okay? We do not need to get lost in the details of the photos. Photos on a listing really are meant to just get a sense of the space. The reason I mention this is, let's say even on your cell phone now is one of these new fancy phones that takes a 18 megapixel photo or some really big number there. If you took a picture at the maximum resolution and printed that picture out at full size, it would be a very large wall poster. Okay, a large wall poster would print out at 100% at the highest resolution your device could do. Now, compare a very large wall poster to the size of your screen that you're looking at this on. If you're looking on it like I am at on a 24-inch monitor or so, that's fine. It's taking up a decent amount of space. I don't need to worry about what titles are in the library of this home on the shelves. Again, it's all about the space, because think about this. Is this the size of the picture that comes up automatically when somebody looks at a house? No, it's the thumbnail, right? It's this size, okay? Plus, again, it's 2019 at the time of this recording. Most people are probably looking on their phones or their tablets, some kind of mobile device, right? As time marches on, we're all about mobile. So the size of these pictures get increasingly smaller. The size of the device, the first time you see it, it's that little thumbnail, like I said, on the agent report or something. The reason I mention this, here's the point. I promise I have one. The bigger that picture is, the more megapixels, the more detail in that particular photo, the worse it's going to look when it tries to shrink all of those details into a little thumbnail. That nice, expensive listing of yours, that $3 million listing with the amazing views. Now looks like the roof is about to cave in because those crisp lines on the roof are now sagging. The bushes look like they haven't been trimmed in 2 years. It gets too many details in that little tiny space, and it's going to look bad. And I don't want, especially your lovely listing, to look in anything but the best light. So 1024 by 768, that's a perfect size. Even like I said, if you don't necessarily know what that is, your photographer does, just say, hey, this is good. This is fine. Okay. But again, it's up to you. I know that was a long time to listen to advice that you may or may not take, but really, I promise that's coming from a good place. I have a good heart. Okay. So there's your pictures. That's how you can do that. So I'm going to click save at the bottom here. When I click save, now we kind of return back to the screen. So again, I could continue editing along the tabs. I could modify that InstaView tour, upload documents, do the showing time. Okay. But let's go back all the way to the back to the beginning and say, this is Monday. I'm entering this listing. It's not necessarily going to go live until Friday. That's all I know right now. So let's just pretend like, now it's a new day. It's Tuesday. I've since gotten some more information from the homeowner. It's appropriate to continue this operation. How do I return to my incomplete listing? How do I continue this journey? How we can kind of see our listing is we can hover over My Matrix, go to My Listings, and in this drop-down box in the upper left where it says Show, we want this to say, for instance, My Incomplete Listings. Once it says My Incomplete Listings, it'll be here. All I've got to do is put a check mark, and I can click Edit and continue editing that listing. Okay. Now again, as FMLS staff, I have some extra lines here, so don't necessarily worry about these. But what we can do is along the top, residential input. That was what we selected to go into those tabs along the top. So as I was mentioning in my scenario before, if I wanted to enter this on Monday but not yet publish it till Friday, let's pretend that's my scenario. And now here it is. It's Friday. I'm about to walk out the door down to Disney World, but I want to publish this listing. It's appropriate right now. All I'd have to do is click residential input. It takes me, as I said, right back to these tabs. And provided all of my required information is correct, all I have to do is click submit property down at the bottom, and off it would go into the wild blue yonder. And hopefully I would get an offer in seconds. Right? That's all I'd have to do. So one more time, I went to My Matrix, My Listings. I made sure that this said My Incomplete Listings, selected the one that I want to edit because I might have more, right? And all I have to do is click Edit and go right into here. The statuses, don't worry about these just yet, okay? Open houses, we're going to get to that in just a second as well. Manage virtual tours. This link, remember that you can have up to 2 virtual tours. The free one, which is the InstaView tour, it's mentioned down at the bottom. We saw that earlier. And also the fancy one that you might choose. And remember what happens with that fancy one. They come out, they take the footage, they go back and they do their post-processing in the office, and then they're going to send you that link, right? So remember that I could go back to the input screen at the top there and go over to the appropriate tab, scroll down, paste that in. If I just click Manage Virtual Tours, instead it just takes me right to that field, and all I have to do is paste it in. So it's a bit of a shortcut to that field when you're in that situation where you just need to go in and add that virtual tour link to your listing. All right. Delete incoming listing. So for instance, let's go back to our scenario. I was entering this on Monday. I thought I was going to get this listing. Maybe I'm kind of putting the cart in front of the horse just a little too much. And in the meantime, the seller calls me and says, hey, I know I'm supposed to list with you, but I just found out that my cousin is a real estate agent, and I was talking to my grandmother, and she's going to cut me out of the will if I don't use my cousin as the listing agent. Oh, darn it. Okay, well, that's sad. That's unfortunate, but I understand. I don't want you to get out of your grandmother's will. maybe go list with your cousin for a few weeks. And if it doesn't happen, come back to me. That'll get your grandmother satisfied, right? So maybe you just want to delete this. So as I mentioned, incomplete listings will only stay in the system for up to 2 weeks, 14 days. So you could just let this expire naturally. However, it's nice to kind of remember it reserves an FMLS number for this listing in the meantime. So it's nice to catch and release if you're not going to do this. So it's a nice thing to do. If we're not going to use this, we can click delete incoming listing, and that will release that FMLS number back to the next agent who wants to use it. We don't want to artificially inflate our FMLS number, the amount of listings that we've got. Wow, all of a sudden we're at 800,000 listings, or whatever. So it might not be a bad idea just to kind of delete that, get it out of the way, especially, for instance, if you're a really successful agent, I hope you are, and maybe you've got a lot of listings that you need to think about at any given time. Why junk up more space in your brain for listings that are no longer appropriate to really deal with? So delete those when you're done if they're not going to come to fruition. Managed photos we looked at. I kind of gave you the little spiel there about managing photos. Showing time I mentioned earlier. Check out videos or the knowledge base on showing time for more information about that. Upload documents, again, check out other videos and the knowledge base for how to upload documents to a listing. That's going to give you that. InstaView, again, is the free virtual tour that you can go in and change the background, the music, all that kind of stuff. So there's just some options specific to incomplete listings. One more time, I'm going to kind of just refresh our palette back to the main homepage of Matrix. And let's move on to editing an existing listing. Okay, so we have some choices here. If your listing is active, we can click on the My Active Listings, bring that up. We want to go, though, to the editable listings so that way we get the edit pencil to the left. Okay, or we saw this before under the add edit. Remember, we had these other choices. So far, we've looked at add new, and then we walked through, well, when it's incomplete later on, we can come back to it. But so far, we've just played with this link. We also have edit existing, the quick modify, and we also have the FMLS number field. So I would, again, advise you in this way to use these. It's going to depend on exactly what kind of role you're in regarding this listing. If you are the listing agent for this listing, as I showed you just a second ago back on the Home tab, you can click on the My Editable Listings link in the My Listings widget. Conversely, you could also hover over Matrix, My Matrix up at the top, and then go to My Listings and choose it from here, My Editable Listings there. It's just a shortcut to this screen, that widget is, so that's just 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. Or over here on the Add Edit screen that I'm looking at right now, if this is your own listing, that quick modify drop-down box will be your personal inventory that you could check something off there. So see here we have my incomplete listing that I was working on a moment ago, and there's my other active listings. Notice that they say act at the beginning of those lines, so I can tell what status they're currently in along with their address. Okay. But again, maybe you're not the listing agent. Maybe you're a listing coordinator. You're an office manager. You're an assistant. You're the broker. Somebody else who might be coming in to do some work here. Your other choices are the edit existing link or the FMLS number. A fun little scenario that I like to use for this. Let's just say that you are the office manager and that agent went to Disney World, right? We're going to kind of stay in the same MO. We're going to stay in the same world. That listing agent went to Disney and they call you and they're like, wow, I can't believe how much fun I'm having. And by the way, that property is now pending. Would you be nice to me and put my listing in pending status while I go ride Thunder Mountain, or something? Yeah, okay, fine, whatever. What's the FMLS number? Right? Maybe you're getting a little dig because you're not having any fun not being at Disney World. So darn well they don't know what the FMLS number is, but that's what you're going to do. You're going to kind of make them squirm for a minute, yeah? So what's the FMLS number? and they're kind of hemming and, oh my gosh, I don't know, but I know the address. And you're like, okay, fine, I'll let you off the hook. So if you have the FMLS number, that's what goes here. Or if you want to let them off the hook, they don't know what the FMLS number is, they can click on Edit Existing, or you can click on Edit Existing, and up comes the screen where you can put in, for instance, the address. Oh, I don't know what the FMLS number is, but the address is da-da-da-da-da-da. You can put that in here, search for it, and either way, whether you're searching for that property using the Edit Existing link or the FMLS number, it would bring up and you can edit that listing that way. So I'm going to go ahead and just use this way. It doesn't matter which of these 3 ways, or 5 actually, if you count the widget on the dashboard or using the My Matrix, My Listings item in the menu, it's going to bring up the same screen. So let's edit this particular listing, and it's going to come up with some more information. Now remember, this is very similar to the edit screens that I had available to me in my incomplete listing, but we get some extra data now that this is actually an existing listing that's been on the market. So for instance, we have the FMLS number at the top, we have the photo, the current list price, the status, which in this case is active, the expiration date, etc. So what we've got here, again, a lot of these you're going to notice are very similar to the ones that you saw in the incomplete listing. So always this first listing, or this first link, I should say, is where it's going to take me back into the tabs. So if I click residential input, again, it takes me right back in here. So if I want to do, for instance, a price change, I could go to the listing tab and change the price. Okay, maybe I screwed up the directions. I can go over to remarks, correct the directions, right? Whatever kind of data I might need to change in the listing, I could do so there, okay? Otherwise, let me just kind of go back to that particular listing. We have different statuses here. So change to pending. So if this goes into contingent due diligence or pending status, I could click on that. All I've got to do is select what status that should be. So if this wants to go into pending here, the binding agreement date, I can click on the little calendar page to say, maybe that's today's date. Click OK. Proposed close date might be a month from now. My due diligence ends if I'm in a due diligence period, but I'm not because I chose pending. Okay. Who's the selling agent? I can type that in. If I don't know the selling agent's ID, I can click the link here that says find a selling agent and look at it that way. And then if I just click submit property now, all of my required fields are entered. Click submit, and it's giving me error messages because I've got old fields that I haven't addressed, like appliances, common walls. This is not something that you would normally get, so bear with me on that one. But anyway, provided, of course, you're not a trainer that just has kind of a partially filled in listing, but in your normal day-to-day operation, that's all you would need here. Status pending, binding agreement, proposed close date, click submit, off you go. Okay. So it would then, it would show immediately that this was pending. Okay. Again, provided you're not doing like I'm doing and have a half entered listing, I apologize. But it's very, very easy to change your statuses. Just click on the appropriate status that you want to put this in, and fill in the required fields. It's a very simple form. Usually there's no more than 3 required fields at maximum. But again, also not to kind of nana boo boo, look what I can do. But you're not going to have, for instance, change to withdrawn, expired, canceled. Those are all FMLS kind of staff links there, so don't worry that you don't see those. Manage virtual tours is where you're going to paste that virtual tour, as I told you earlier. Manage photos, we looked at that earlier. Showing time, upload documents, InstaView, we looked at those. The other 2 down there, don't worry about those. Okay, so really the last real topic to discuss then is open houses. See, there's a link here that says open houses. We didn't necessarily have open houses available on our incomplete listing. So once a listing goes in the system, we can add an open house to it. So if I click that link, we'll see that this comes up here. And we have two types of open houses. We have caravan and open house. Just in case you're not familiar with the difference, an open house is basically exactly that. An open house is the one where you're generally just driving by a subdivision and you see a sign in the yard that says open house from 12 to 5 on Sunday. Woohoo, here we go, right? So maybe this listing is going on the market Friday. So my first thing that I'm going to have is an open house on that Sunday maybe. So I can select open house. I'm going to choose that date for Sunday coming up. The start time, the end time, I'm going to go from noon to 5. The status, I'm going to put active. Am I serving any kind of refreshments? Maybe I can put in lunch or hors d'oeuvres or something like that. Put in any kind of open house remarks that I want to. Come see this, it's fabulous. You know, maybe you're going to just paste your public remarks in there. That's a possibility. Okay. And then when I'm ready, I could either click more in the lower right corner, which is what I'm going to do here in just a minute. Or if this was the only one I wanted to plan right now, I could click submit property at the bottom. And now the system would have on schedule an open house next Sunday from 12 to 5. But to give us the full flavor, let me go ahead. I'm going to click more. And all that does is drop down one more entry line. And so we added an open house above. Let's talk about a caravan. So again, what a caravan is, in case you don't know, this is also known as an agent preview. Sometimes people will call it that. In our market in the Atlanta area, I don't know how this came about, but for whatever reason, caravans typically are most successful when you do them on Tuesdays in the early afternoon. For some reason, Tuesdays are just typically the days that you're going to go to your office meeting in the morning, and then people kind of scour caravans, and then they go home, and that's kind of their Tuesday. You can have a caravan on any day of the week that you want, but you'll find if you start looking for them, they're generally Tuesdays. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and select caravan. The open house is on Sunday, so let's do a caravan for the following Tuesday, which is the 12th in this case. 2 to 5. Oh, let's just go to 2 to 4, maybe. You might even do 1 to 3 or, something like that. Status, well, this is active. Again, if I want to serve refreshments, I can put that there. If not, I can just leave that blank. Again, remember, only the required fields have the yellow background, so I don't need to put anything there. I could keep clicking more as needed. I could fill in every Sunday and every Tuesday with caravans and open houses from here until doomsday if I wanted to. But I'm just going to leave these here. Okay. So what we've got, you can click submit, be done, take those away. Let's just say, for example's sake, though, one last kind of thought here. Let's just say we do the open house on Sunday. The open house on Sunday is wildly successful. We get 4 offers based on attendance at our open house on Sunday. Do I need to do then a caravan on Tuesday? Probably not, right? So what I could do is maybe Sunday night after the open house, or maybe Monday once we get a few offers going, I could just come in and click delete over here to the right, take this particular caravan out. I don't need it anymore, right? Just some kind of thoughts on how you might want to kind of keep your listings clean, so to speak. We don't need to annoy the seller with even more showings that are unnecessary, right? So just notice that there is a delete button over to the right, okay? And typically, you might notice that under status, you have canceled and ended. That should happen kind of automatically. I wouldn't worry about those. So just leave that active, I would recommend, okay? But if we go back to the PowerPoint and kind of review here, so over the course of the last hour and 10 minutes or so, we accessed and navigated through Matrix. specific to the screens for adding and editing listings. We talked about adding a new listing, how to start that. We had the 3 ways, remember. We had fill from realist tax, copy a listing, start with a blank listing, the tabs along the top, setting up Google Street View and the map and all that kind of stuff. We talked about editing an existing listing in the last 15 minutes or so, change it to active, change it to pending, pretty simple stuff. How to access that, we can go through the widget on the home screen of Matrix. We can go up to the menu at the top, My Matrix, My Listings. Make sure again that you're going to look at My Editable Listings in that particular menu at the top of the screen. Or we can go back to the Add Edit tab and look for an existing listing on that screen. You have a few options there. Changing a listing status, active to pending to contingent, back to active. It's all very simple when you're pulling up that listing you want to edit. In the last 5 or so minutes, we talked about adding and modifying open houses and caravans and what's the difference between those two. Caravans are typically on Tuesdays in our market, that kind of stuff. And then we also talked about photos. Remember, I kind of gave you the advice about 1024 by 768 being a good size, how to reorder the photos, delete them, the fact that you can have up to 40 in the matrix system, and to add the verbiage under each photo, you just click on the photo, click edit in the line down below, and also on that screen where you're adding the verbiage, don't forget you can also rotate photos if maybe they're uploading from your phone upside down or sideways or something like that. So you do have that available as well. Okay. Otherwise, that's it for this particular recording. Don't forget, if you do have any problems or questions, you can always contact our support department. They're available Monday through Friday, 9 to 6, Saturday, 9 to 5 at the phone number 404-255-8660, option 1.